Hi, and welcome to DynaRaw. In this video, I will be demonstrating the features of the DynaRaw application and going over all the options available in the current version. So let me switch over to my Mac view. This is my main interface to DynaRaw. It can be scaled, obviously, so I can just drag it by the corner to whatever size I want, or I can go full screen size if I want to. The purpose of DynaRaw is obviously to convert raw files into something that you will use in the final application of the picture. And that particular file format can now be many more types of files. Previous versions just had JPEG and TIFF. Now we've added many more features. So let me first talk about the most basic feature, which is of course file open. You can reach it by clicking file open, or doing a open raw button, or dragging one or multiple files onto the DynaRaw interface. That is something I should not forget. DynaRaw is a batch converter, so that means that if you have multiple files that all need the same correction, you don't need to open them one by one. You first figure out which are the correct settings, then you open all the files that you need to be processed that way at once, and they're all processed. That makes it faster to work with. So let me just start by opening a raw picture. I'll just take a demo picture like this one. So what it shows is actually the preview, obviously, and it's to scale. It's now 1 to 5.34. So actual pixels, there are 5 times more than what I can show on this screen. So when you see me move the cursor, you can see a magnification. There's a magnifier window, which is new. And by default, the output scale, which you can see here, is set to 1. That means that I am using the same output width as the raw image was shot at. Obviously, we can scale that down too if we want to, because if we want to make an image for a website, we don't need a 5,000 pixel image, because that will just slow things down. So this magnification window here and here, raw and processed, obviously shows you the raw and the processed image. So as we can see here, this image is overexposed, so the first thing we would do is bring down exposure. New in this version is the ability to go down in logical steps, so not just by sliding until you get to the right value, but just using the up and down. So we can go 1/3, half a stop, maybe even 2/3 of a stop, and now we can see details in the dress that are completely lost in the raw as it was shot, so that helps. Now obviously we have some shadow problems because we don't have enough details in the shadows anymore, so we could do some shadow recovery here to compensate that, and it starts to look better than the raw does. Also, the skin tones look more natural this way. Now the reason there's a raw and a processed here, and also one on the cursor, is some people like to focus on the image. So when they want to inspect a certain section of the image, like for instance the flowers, you want to be able to move to the flowers and then see instantly what it does at true pixel size. So the processed view is actually shown here. What if we want to make an image that's only 2,000 pixels in width? Then of course the preview has to be showing the output result. So if we do scale the output down to something that is close to 2,000, then when we move the cursor over the image, we can see that the processed area and the magnification in the cursor area is now actually a lot smaller, which is logical, because this is the true size that we'll be processing when we're done. The advantage of this is that you can see the effect of your settings on a true 1:1 pixel resolution. So if I do some sharpening, let's just do a lot of sharpening, then we can see the effects of the sharpening on the actual output size. So you don't have to guess what the effect will be on the final image, but you can see in the process view or by looking at the cursor. By the way, if you don't like that cursor being a preview, you can go to settings and change that to a more common magnifying lens. So now you can see there's a cursor that does exactly the same thing, but it allows you to move the cursor to exactly the area where you want to focus on without showing the preview on the cursor position. So what else is new? We've added a little snapshot feature. So if you want to compare some things that are possible, you can make a snapshot of this one. You choose, for the first time, you choose a location. So we'll make a new folder and call it snapshot. And what it does, it actually makes a screenshot. You hear the sound of a screenshot, but only of the image. And if you scaled it down to a size smaller than the preview window, it will be of that particular size. So in the snapshots, you now have a PNG, much like you would if you take a screenshot with the name, snapshot, the date and the time, and the actual result. It allows to have different versions and open two in preview and compare the two. I can quickly show that if I want to make a second one. I can reset all. This was the original. I can do a second snapshot. And now if I go to snapshot folder and open both by using the shift button and then you're saying open, I can see both images and I can switch between the two and see the differences of the process compared to the original. It's just an example of how you can use this. The other thing that is new is the ability to save to more formats. So I used to have only JPEG and TIFF available here, and now there are more options. So PDF, SVG, PNG, to Photoshop, and to Affinity. The first one obviously will just create a JPEG. So if I save this particular image, let's do some tweaking on it so it has a little bit of sense. It makes a little sense to do something with the image like this. I'll add some sharpening and I'll scale the image down a little bit and I'll save it as a JPEG. It asked me for a folder again, so I will go to the desktop, create a new folder for JPEGs. You can decide where you want to save things, so it always asks you where you want to save. You can create a new folder or select a folder. And if you do a second export, it will by default use the last folder that you saved to and then allow you to either choose that one by select or going to a different folder and choosing that one. So if I want to export in a different format, like a PDF, I can click on save. It'll ask me where. I'll just do it for now. I'll do it into the same folder. And it creates a PDF. And if I look into the JPEG folder, we can see there's a JPEG and a PDF now. Same applies to SVG. We can save it as an SVG. Apparently, the use for that is for instance, users of CorelDRAW or CorelDRAW, if you prefer that pronunciation. Turns out that a lot of people use that, or some people use it at least, to have their image scalable. So they work with Corel or CorelDRAW with images, and by using SVG as a base, it makes it easier to manipulate the image. The other option is here PNG. So let's save a PNG. And the final few options, oops, wrong one. Final two options are you can save to Photoshop or to Affinity. Now in this case I don't have a Photoshop installed on this one, so I'll show you to Affinity. It says transfer because the advantage is you're not saving an intermediate version for that. You're just transferring it as if DynaRaw is part of Affinity. So you can say transfer, and that will launch Affinity and open up the image in its with the settings that you chose in DynaRaw. So that's an easy way to get your images across to your application. That can be Photoshop or Affinity. Of course, if you don't have either of those, you can just choose a file format and use that. That is basically what is new about DynaRaw. Let me just show you that once you are happy with settings, you can process multiple files in the same way. So let me open up multiple files at the same time. I'll first go to Affinity and close the images that I have open. So I'll just close this one, and I'll close this image, and I'll hide Affinity. And if I then say Open Raw, and I will process this one, and with Alt I can choose, or with Shift I can choose several files. So let's just do two to show the principle, or maybe three. And we can say Open. And what it will do, it will open up each of those images and transfer them to Affinity using the settings that we just set. So we can have 3 images moved from DynaRaw to Affinity in one go. That makes it easier to do batch processing, which is not always as easy with other applications. Obviously this wouldn't be a very good way of processing the file. But you can see that, of course, it does a great job of recovering details that were lost because of overexposure, but then of course you need to compensate for the fact that you're getting a lot of dark areas without any details by using some shadow recovery. So let's just exaggerate that a little bit. And maybe use a little highlight recovery and set the exposure a little bit less, and then we get a good preview of what is going to happen once we save the image, including the sharpening, noise reduction, and whatever we use. And once we're happy with it, we can just choose the file format that we need. Let's just use SVG for now and save it. Choose a folder for it. So in this case, let me make a new folder with SVG. So I'll go Desktop, New Folder, SVG, and select. And that will create in the SVG folder the SVG file. And an SVG, by the way, opens in a browser as well. So if you open it in Safari, you can see that opens the image at a 1 pixel size, true pixel size, allowing you to scroll through it. Okay, so that is basically the possibilities of DynaRaw. Now, I know there's always room for improvement. If you have any suggestions on what could be added to make this application work better for you, then feel free to do so, because many of the features that are now new in this version, like the magnifier and the different file formats, actually came into DynaRaw after customers requested those features. So it's very simple. If you request a feature, we'll look into it and see if we can implement it and add it to the next version. And you'll get it free of charge. Now, of course, the other thing to mention is that this is a App Store app. So that means you will not be paying a monthly fee or yearly fee. You just pay a single fee, which is fairly low, and you'll be able to use this application for as long as you like. Which is one of the reasons that many customers switch from Photoshop to alternatives, because nobody likes having a monthly bill just for image manipulation. If it's not your job, you don't want to pay 10 euros or more to Adobe for being able to process your raw images. So with this application you can do it for a fraction of the cost, and you can do not the same as with Photoshop obviously, but you can process your raw files, and if that's what you need to do, this can be a good solution for you. So if you have any suggestions, contact us through the website AppForce1, or reply using the settings feature, which has the ability to show the link, show the website of AppForce1, or you can email us at info, which is also good because it brings me here. I forgot to mention one thing. When you're exporting JPEG, you can set an export quality, because if you want to have small files you can just reduce the JPEG quality. Then we have the feature to override existing files, yes or no. So if we're saving the same file, same raw file, to the same file type in the same folder, it will ask us to overwrite, yes or no. And we have the feature use file name or sequential. The sequential can be used, for instance, if you have a selection out of a large number of images that you want to present somewhere on a website, and you want to give them logical names. So it can be whatever, a wedding of 5 January. And then the next number you set, so the next one is going to be 1. If you then process 10 images, they all get named wedding 5 January 01, 02, 03, etc. So you don't have to rename your images. Then the other thing that is worth mentioning is the default ICC profile. Because you're processing to a non-RAW format, you need to define the ICC profile for that particular file. By default it's sRGB, because the majority of screens are sRGB and not Adobe RGB. But if you prefer to use Adobe RGB, you can just by selecting Adobe RGB here and okaying that. By the way, all of these settings are saved permanently in a settings file, and that also includes, that's the last feature I'll mention, that also includes the file open and file save folder. So if I go to file open, it remembers the last folder I went to. So I open from RAW, and when I save to SVG. So unlike Photoshop, for instance, where you constantly are flipping folders where your RAW is from your RAW file and your processed images are in your processed folder, here you don't need to switch, because it remembers that your RAW images came from a certain folder and your processed images go into another folder, which makes more sense to me. Okay, that is it. I hope you found this video useful. If you have any problems, please contact us. Do not just file a 1-star review saying it doesn't work. You can always get help from us if you contact us. We could even be asking you to send screenshots, or in extreme cases we could even do a screen sharing session where we look at the problem and try to identify and solve it. But please don't just leave a review saying it doesn't work and give it 1 star, because that's not helpful to anyone. So far we have not had too many complaints about files not being processed, but it is possible that if you have a new camera that Apple doesn't support in their RAW conversion, that it will not be converted by DynaRaw either. That's not common, it's quite rare, but if you do have that, feel free to let us know, and we'll look into the possibility of adding it, although we have to be honest, we're somewhat dependent on how fast Apple starts implementing support for that particular RAW format, because RAW is subject to change, it always changes. Okay, that is basically it. Let me know if you have any further questions, or if you found something that doesn't work the way you expect, or would like to see an extra feature included. then feel free to contact us. And for now, I'd like to thank you for watching and wish you a good day. Bye-bye.